Good morning, my brothers and sisters. Welcome to episode 63. We are in for a treat today because it's a great story. It's a great mystery. The personnel is great. I'm going to title this The Grave Robber at the Tomb, The Case of Mis-Identity. So here we go. This is Mary Magdalene. How do we find her? First of all, she gets healed of 7 demons. So that's how thankful she is. By personally, when Jesus casts out a demon from you, it's gone for good. Times 7. So she's a very grateful person and exhibits it all the way through her life. She's at all aspects of the crucifixion, the suffering, the crucifixion, the burial, and now the resurrection. She is the person, number one person, if you want to find out about the death and resurrection of Jesus. She is the person you want to have lunch with in heaven. All right, here we go. Mary, so here's how we get to Mary having this personal encounter. This is how scholars propose a chronology. First of all, she goes to the tomb. She prepares the day before, buys spices, goes to the tomb. She sees the stone unrolled. She runs to the disciples, and she tells Peter and John. They take off for the tomb, and then Mary returns to the tomb. So at this point, she's seen the rock rolled away, but she has not seen angels. She's not seen Jesus. She's not seen the grave cloth. She's not seen the face cloth. She has not heard news from anybody else. So really, she's very much alone. So here we find her. This is in John chapter 20, verse 11. But Mary stood weeping outside the tomb, and as she wept, she stooped in to look into the tomb. And she saw 2 angels in white, sitting where the body of Jesus had lain, one at the head and one at the feet. And they said to her, talking angels now, "Woman, why are you weeping?" Same question Jesus is going to ask in a second. She said to them, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." Having said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing, but she did not know that it was Jesus. So here's the misidentity. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" Same questions the angel asks. And then this great question, "Whom are you seeking?" Then Mary, here back to Mary, supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." And then this gets so sweet here. Then Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Do not cling to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father." That's interesting, he has not ascended yet. "But go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord," and that he has said these things to her. So as far as the story goes, this case of misidentity, we find Mary thinking that there is a dead Jesus. That's why she's going to the tomb in the first place. And then she misidentifies Jesus as being buried because he's risen, and she's looking for a dead guy, and we're not doing that. And then she misidentifies him as being stolen or lost. Then she physically misidentifies him as the gardener, and then finally she does the great identity and she calls him Rabboni, and they've got a wonderful, sweet thing. I think the key question, and you always got to pay attention when Jesus asks a question, because he always knows the answer and you don't. And he asked the question of her, "Who are you seeking?" And are you seeking a God who's in the grave? Because that bus has left the building. You've come to the wrong place. He's no longer here. Are you seeking a God who we know where he was buried? Because that guy has left the building. Are you seeking a God, essentially, that did not rise? Because that is not the God that we're talking about here. So if you're identifying Jesus as a great prophet or whatever who's buried, that's not the caliber of wonder that we're talking about. We're talking about a guy who is the first fruits of raising from the dead. And she misidentifies him as being robbed, as being stolen from the grave, which is kind of true. There was a grave robber at the tomb, but it was Jesus. He sort of like robs himself from death, and he better do this, or we're all just lost. So let me go to the moment that she has with Jesus here now to end. She has her moment. She gets her name called by Jesus. I mean, she has all these fantastic interactions with Jesus, not the least of which is getting healed from demon possession. But then at the end here, Jesus calls her woman, and that doesn't put the light bulb on. But then when he calls her Mary, so she gets her name called by Jesus, and then she calls him a special name that she has, Rabboni, which means teacher. Then Jesus says, don't cling. And of course, I always wonder, usually when you say, don't cling to me, it usually means that someone is clinging to you. I don't know, hope she gets a hug there, or a bow down and worship like the other woman who grabbed his ankles. And then this is theologically interesting, that he had not ascended at this moment in time, but tells her as a charge. So after they have their moment, then she gets sent on a task, which is to go to the disciples, my brothers, as what Jesus calls them, and tell them that I'm ascending to my Father and your Father, my God and your God. And she obviously obeys and does that, and then adds, I have seen the Lord. So yes, ladies and gentlemen, there was a grave robber at the tomb, and it is Jesus. And this case of missing identity or misidentity, where Mary goes from, she gets her world totally rocked from a dead Jesus to a buried Jesus to a stolen Jesus to the gardener Jesus, and then finally the Jesus that knows her name. Thank you, Lord, for this great word. See you tomorrow.